Hello, this is Don Victor, author of Drawn to Win, host of the podcast Drawn to Win, the director of the Academy of Composition, and the creator of the Core 80 Experience, also known as the See and Grow Rich in Art video course, which you can find out more information at core80.com. This is the Drawn to Win podcast, where I have the incredible privilege to draw artists from around the world into fun and meaningful conversations around art and life, and yes, maybe even a little food. You can hear us each week on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and YouTube. So make sure you subscribe so you always have a seat among friends. Let's get into the show. We just welcome you into this beautiful conversation, Spirit of Beauty. And we seek beauty in all that we do. And so in that, Miss Orit, welcome into the conversation.
Thank you.
Indeed. So Orit, where does this name come from, I must ask?
The name Orit comes from Israel. It's actually a very common Israeli name. It means light. The word or in Hebrew means light. And Orit is a variation on that root word. There's a whole family of names that come from light.
Oh, really?
So, yes, it's a common name.
Let's explore that for a second. I want to hear that. I always love hearing the root words of Jewish, like Jewish root words of things and how they're translated. I find the language to be so rich in visuals. And so okay. So Orit is saying there's more. Like, explain what you're saying there.
So the word or means light. So there are names such as Ora, Orly, Orit, Ori. Depending on if it's a male or a female, it differs.
Oh.
But there are all sorts of names derived from the word light in Hebrew.
That's beautiful.
Thank
That's so cool. It's funny because you think of the word aura, and normally we would spell it. I think it's AURA or something like that.
And that's a different aura, I think, too.
Oh, like a different context or a different meaning, or just a different word?
I think it's a different context too.
So how does aura in the Hebrew, like how would you describe that word? Like, what does that mean? Like, how do you translate that?
I think in Hebrew, just like in Spanish, there are feminine and
masculine.
masculine. So or is masculine. So aura would be feminine, but the word or itself is masculine.
And what does it mean? Like light? Like, what about light? What?
Just plain light, however you would.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. That's cool. Very, very cool. That's nice. Now, I read that you're originally from Israel, correct?
Correct.
And then, like, how long were you born there and raised there, and then you
I was
came to the
born and
States?
raised there. Moved to Minnesota with my family as a teenager.
Wow.
For my dad's job, it was quite a transition. And I actually fit in mostly well. I mean, can be still a culture shock.
Mm-hmm.
But I liked it. And aside from the weather, obviously, and food-wise, as we'll talk about later, it was a little bit of a culture shock too.
Oh my goodness, I bet. So what was something that surprised you that it was so similar to Israel?
What? That's a good question.
Yeah, I'm going to ask a lot of them, and they probably have nothing to do with the questions I asked you earlier. So buckle down. This is what's
Okay.
going to happen.
Maybe as I moved to Minneapolis in junior high school. Maybe the social constructs of school and just how socially things work are probably the same around the world.
Okay.
How that translates, just how kids are. Everything's pretty much translates the same.
So
I would.
humans are humans.
Humans are humans everywhere.
And then like the flip side of that, just to juxtapose it using an art term, um, what was something that you were like, oh, outside of the weather and the food, you were like, oh my goodness, this is, and not judging it good or bad, but just different.
What I would say was different is people in the American North are more reserved, more quiet, where in Israel it's a little bit more of an in your face, a little bit louder, a little bit
Mm.
more pushy society compared to maybe New York or something like that.
Oh, that's
New
intense.
York times
Because
10.
for us Americans, we're like, oh my gosh, New York is the place of pushy and in your face and loud, and
Right.
Israel is
It's
more
a
than
little bit
that.
like that. Yeah. It's like that. And then I would say, and it has some laid back elements to it, depending on whether you're in a city or in the
Mm,
country. But Minneapolis, a lot of the culture comes from immigrants from Scandinavia, and those people are a little bit more on the reserved end, I
yeah.
would say. And that was a little bit of an adjustment. And it still is an adjustment to me that I need to think about, how people are less direct, and I still struggle with that.
Mm. You like being direct?
I think I find that I'm direct, whether I like it or not. It's who I am, and I have to reassess that sometimes and think about it a little bit. It's a challenge for me
It's
sometimes.
one of the things I find as I'm thinking through my head right now, versus my hand, of course. No, I'm thinking about like women that are immigrants, right? And the culture that they come from. And I can think of like, I don't know, five or six off the top of my head. And how in an American culture they come off very pushy, right?
Mhm.
Um, but it's I say pushy even though it has like a negative connotation. But they're just very like direct, honest. Like you're like, I can't even believe you just said that, right? And and I actually deeply admire that about them. And I think there's a freshness in honesty and directness, uh, that I find it so much. I'd rather be around people like that than people that you don't know what they're really thinking and they're kind of like quiet and just looking at you with weird eyeballs. um, so, uh, do people appreciate that about you? Like, do they embrace that in you, like your directness, or is that something that you kind of see
I
people?
think people who are close to me do. People that know me and are close to me do. And then people who get to know me probably, as they get to know me, will probably just get to know that that's who I am, and it's just about getting to know the other person and adjusting yourself.
It's beautiful.
And I think people are who they are, who they are formed when they are young, maybe.
Hmm.
Um, and maybe that's where that comes from. A lot of things in us are cultural, and they're formed when we are young.
Yeah. And the reason why I'm asking all these questions is because ultimately, um, when we create our artworks are always a self portrait of us. And so, by asking those questions about you in terms of honesty and directness, I'm actually not talking about you. I'm actually like wanting to understand that so that when we talk about your artwork, I can see that even clearer in your work. Um, so talking about your work, what are you currently working on? Like, what are you doing right now?
Right now, I am painting a lot of plein air,
Hmm.
uh, pastel work. And when we talked about direct, I used that. I just realized when you said that I use that word a lot when I describe my painting process. I describe
Mm.
myself as a direct painter, which is very interesting. I didn't realize that until you pointed this out. But yeah, I do a lot of plein air painting. I like being outside. I like seeing how the light is, but I also like to bring the paintings back into the studio and reassess how they look inside as opposed to outside, and adjust. And I'm a little bit of I need to reflect a little bit, put the paintings aside, look at them again. Um, right. I've been liking a combination of nature and architecture, some sort of architecture
Mhm.
in my paintings. I like the combination of geometric and organic forms. I like playing with texture and pastel, how hard I press the medium and
Mhm.
layer, and then layering warm and cool tones, and getting all these light effects and vibrancy, um, and achieving more control with just layers and light touch. I'm attracted to edges, uh,
Mhm.
when to have hard edges, and then blurring my edges, pushing that concept. I don't know if I'm going all over the place. I'm just kind
No,
of
no, no.
free
You're.
flowing right now.
It's kind of like your art is an object, and all you're doing is like floating all around it, trying to explain the different dimensions of it.
Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, that's beautiful. I'll tell you, when I look at your work, as I click through them, I keep having the same experience over and over and over again, and I like it. And what that experience is, if anyone looks at Orit's work, this is how I would describe it. Take a deep breath. Everyone, take a deep breath right now, like, right? And maybe you take that deep breath for about a second, and then for about 6 seconds, breathe out, right? And so when I'm looking at your work, what I realize is that you always have like this moment of like intense light. It's like a breathing in, and then the rest of it's just this beautiful, like slow release. And I'm looking at your work and I'm experiencing this. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And it's over and over. And I like um that experience where it's just like this moment of intensity, and then it's just kind of like this nice resting that happens afterwards. Does that make any sense?
It totally does. You describe it so beautifully. I couldn't say it that nicely, but I am attracted to light. I'm a sunny day painter, and that's what inspires me is how light hits something.
Mm,
Um, and I am a sunny day painter. Uh, Cloudy days do throw me off, I have to say.
mm,
Um, and the other day I did paint in a cloudy day, and then I waited for that moment when the sun came out, and I said, "Oh, now is the time to put all my light notes in." Now I
mm,
do it, and I look for light, direct light, reflected light, um, and I mean that's what inspires me. And I'm more of a vignette painter, so I'll paint more of a subject close up rather than that far away vistas,
gotcha.
landscape. That's what I'm attracted to. Um, I've noticed that about myself.
You know, it's funny you say that because when we were talking earlier about being direct and honest, right? Um, what's it's very uniquely, um, from my understanding, I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. It's a very unique American trait is space, personal space, right? Like,
Right.
hey, like, hey, don't get 3 feet in front of me. Like, you're violating my space. And then you go to another country, and it's all of a sudden like people are sitting on top of you and touching your stuff and touching your babies, and you're like, what's going on? And it's like there's this level of um acceptance and understanding that you're they're going to violate what we would call your personal space, but it's like there's a level of intimacy just with people and things. And so so I like the fact that you're saying that you're a vignette painter and you like to get up close to things and that intimate space with it. I use the word intimate, but um that you like to step into that, and I think that's part of where the quietness in the work comes from. Is is it does really have this beautiful sense of like you're in the special moment with it. You're not just looking at it from a distance, like just observing it. And when did you first find out that making art was something that you wanted to do?
So my path to painting was a little bit indirect. I always knew I loved art and painting as a child. I was born into a family of artists. My grandfather was a prolific oil landscape painter.
Mm,
He was a horticulturalist in Israel, and he was an immigrant from Eastern Europe by way of South America, and he studied, always drew as a child, and he studied art at the university in Buenos Aires, and then immigrated to Israel, and on the side painted throughout his life.
mm,
And my mother always also painted. Um, and she's self-taught and still paints daily, and as a child I painted next to her and was recognized at school and art classes for my talent. But then growing up, I was steered by my parents towards um, a safer route path of a better way of making a living, per se,
mm-hmm,
quote unquote, and was steered towards engineering. I was a computer science major for a while, and then shifted to interior design as a profession, as a way to combine creativity and
mm-hmm,
a technical side for kind of a safer career, maybe not as lucrative financially as computer science, but nevertheless, I graduated from college with an interior design degree and have been a working commercial interior designer ever since. Um, and
do you still do interior design?
I still do, and
Wow, that's
didn't
cool.
really realize or know that you could make a living from art. No one told me that. Now, observing my fellow painters, I if I get close enough to them, I usually ask them how they, if I'm personal enough with them, I find out how they make a living, if they have something going on the side, if they have support, or if they're completely financially independent. That's very interesting to me to find out. And many of them, having started early enough, are making it. Some aren't. Some have a support structure behind them. That's very interesting to me. But I mean, going back and redoing your life is not
An option.
an option for us. We do the best we can. And
Yeah.
so, how I came into um, starting to paint was I was inspired by a director of interior design where I worked, who was very good at architectural rendering by hand so beautifully, and was also a prolific artist on the side outside of work,
Hmm.
um, and was selling his work well. And I really admired what he was doing and was thinking, I can do this. I wasn't attracted to the abstract art that he was doing, but then I didn't know what to paint, where to start, where to paint. I had no idea. And then lo and behold, I was laid off during the recession in 2009.
Mm.
And then I had a lot of time on my hands. I, at the time, got a speeding ticket for going 15 miles an hour over the limit. And I had a lot of time on my hands, but not a lot of money. And I went to court and asked to volunteer instead of pay the fine. And I ended up volunteering at a local art school. And then I found out that as a volunteer, you get free art classes for your time. So that's how it all started. And this art school, this local art school, has incredible art instructions by local, very successful artists. And some of them are full-time artists. Some of them also teach at the university and local community colleges over here. I was very lucky to get that as my launch point. They also have multiple times a week, they have life drawing sessions. I started off into life drawing. I really fell in love with it.
Mm.
And I also happened to join local plein air group and was painting with them, or attempting to paint landscape outside with them while I was painting the figure, and knew that someday, somehow, I will be a landscape painter, just because that is in my history, my family history, and I admire landscape painting so much. And eventually, I grew into becoming a landscape painter and a plein air painter. And then outside of this local art school, I started studying under other artists I admire, local or national, by either organizing workshops at the school and bringing these people in, or just traveling to take the workshops, or joining the different pastel societies and taking the pastel workshops that they offered.
So when you say that you painted, do you mean like you're using oil paint, or do you mean that you're using pastels?
Both.
Both. Okay.
And I call pastel painting pastel painting as well.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It can be a drawing or a sketch, but it can also be painting.
So when you use the pastel versus the paintbrush, well, first of all, which one do you prefer better?
I started with oils and charcoal, and then also how I fell into pastel was also a little bit of an accident, or kismet, whatever you want to call it. At the office where I was volunteering, people drop off.
That's right.
They donate art supplies, and someone dropped off a box of pastels, and I asked for permission to keep it, and I started taking classes, and I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the directness of holding the medium, and instead of having a brush in between me and the surface.
Yeah, you know what they call that, right? It's called directness.
Directness. There you go.
We started talking about that. I'm like, wait, yeah, I guess the pastels are very, very direct. I mean, because you're almost touching the paper, right? I mean, you're so
That's
close to
right.
it, and it's a pressure going through. It doesn't have to travel through a brush. Yeah, that's cool. And you do. I never liked pastels because I just found it too messy.
It is
And
messy, but so is oil.
that's why I don't really paint that much.
Mhm.
But I'll tell you, I accidentally ordered a thing of pastels about a year ago. And when they came to me in Amazon, I'm like, oh, these are the wrong thing. But I didn't want to send them back. And so I still have them. And over the last year, I've seen several um, oil pastel paintings that I just absolutely love. And um, and I think, with the composition and the shapes that you can kind of craft with them, it's like almost like it's like almost a silkiness to it, where oil paint's more of a buttery type of effect or feel. But there's something about it that I'm really finding myself drawn to it, and I want to take some time and just get over my don't want to make a mess uh, thing, and and explore some pastels. And looking at your work, you're one of the people that when I look at it, I'm just like, ooh, like I think that might actually be fun, like to get in there and play with them.
Oh, I find it to be really fun. And don't get me wrong, I love oil paintings. I mean, oil paintings are just luscious and buttery. Uh, but personally, I like working with the pastel. And the reason why I'm focusing on one thing is just because I feel that in order to do something well, I need to focus on one thing if I want to master it and specialize. It'd be nice to be good at everything, right? But also with working as an interior designer, I feel like I need to use my time well. And
Mm,
by focusing on pastel rather than not having picking multiple mediums, I can do something well or strive to do it well.
yeah. That's cool. That's cool. And then what kind of stuff do you do as an interior designer? Like, what's your forte?
I'm a commercial designer, so I've worked on everything: offices, police stations, fire stations.
They hired designers for that stuff?
Yes, you have someone do the outside, the building, and then you have someone do the inside.
Nice.
And that's an interior designer, whether it's the finishes, the interior architecture, the millwork, the lighting, um, the super graphics, the art. There's so much to it. Even managing the MEP engineers, mechanical,
Hmm.
and the lighting engineers, the plumbing engineers, picking the fixtures. We kind of get involved in all of it and working with the architects hand in hand, basically.
And as the interior designer, are you drawing out plans and composing the inside of this stuff like that, or
Many times, yeah. Many
yeah?
times I'm doing the space planning as well, and many times I'm also doing the permit drawings, which then the architect signs
Mm,
off on. But I do all of it. Sometimes I detail a lot of it, but then many things I'm not allowed to detail, like the
yeah,
stairs, for example, or the elevator shaft. Someone else that would do that, but otherwise, I can pretty much do all of it.
that's
Um,
cool.
yeah, and depending on where you work, the division of labor is different, and you just
Hmm.
kind of stay in your role and do
What
your
part of
part.
what part of the interior design do you just when you get to do it, you're just like, oh yeah, that you're just excited?
I like all parts of it. And I'm an introvert, so I like sitting behind a computer and drafting and detailing. And it is a lot of it's everything's on the computer nowadays, so
Hmm.
there's not too much hand drafting. When you're working on concept in the beginning, you get to draw a little bit, but otherwise, it's all about computer drafting. I like all of it, and then sometimes the projects get very long, and the work is can be tedious. So like everything else,
Yeah.
um,
During this crazy Corona time, are you working from home on projects now, or is everything kind of just put on a hold?
things for me are a little bit on a break right now. Work is a little bit slow, but I'm kind of enjoying it to tell you the truth,
Of course.
because then I'm getting to do my art, and I'm looking at it a little bit as an art vacation. Um,
Artcation. I like it.
Vacation, I'm so enjoying it. I mean, it's bad to say. I know that people are sick, and so that's not good, and lives are being lost. Um,
Yeah, but that's always the case. And I don't mean to be cold when it comes to the corona, but the reality is there's always people dying and there's always people sick and there's always people this and that. Um, but the but it is nice that we get to slow down. And what I find very beautiful, I just find it's beautiful right now is you have a whole bunch of people who are complaining and crying and frustrated and angry and all those things, and those are all incredible human emotions that need to be expressed. But on the flip side of that, I'm absolutely impressed and consider it a joy to be a human being right now because the level of creativity, that people are engaging in, um, and I think what's happening is people are starting to come back to understand the appreciation of the arts, right? Like when you're in times like this, you're watching movies, you're spending time with each other, you're getting time to actually just go draw or paint or, like be creative and how it's giving comfort to the soul, and so though we're going through a very strange and not so nice time right now, when I step back and I look at the beauty that's coming out of it, the humanity that's coming out of it, um, it's hard for me to get really upset. Like it's just to me, it's just too beautiful.
Mhm.
What I see happening. Uh, do you ever? This is gonna be a strange question. Do you ever feel guilty creating artwork?
Oh, that is an interesting question. I don't think I feel guilty. I don't. I think I'm thankful for it. I'm just thankful for having found this.
Mm,
It gives me joy and purpose.
mm,
Uh, I'm so thankful for having this rediscovered art. And I'm thankful for where I'm going with it. I'm thankful for the events that I'm participating in and for the people who are organizing them and for the workshops that I take, the mentorship I receive. It's all been very incredible, I have to say.
cool. Now, who are you working with in terms of your mentorship?
Nothing formal, but having been a part of a plein air group called the Florida Painters, there are always people that are ahead of you in the journey and
Mm-hmm.
people who are behind you, and then you're kind of somewhere in the middle. And then you watch the people who are ahead of you and see what events have they done and uh, who are they studying under. And they're also happy to share information and um, that camaraderie and help has been really priceless, I have to say. Um, yeah, I would have to say that that's where I've gotten my mentorship mostly.
Is there one or two artists specifically that you um, really appreciate the connection that you have with them and the results that came out in your artwork from it?
A person I go and paint with a lot, I would say Lynn Polly is a good friend that I paint with. Um, and then I would say people I've studied locally under um, at Creality School of Art, that's the art school. Stacy Barter
Mm,
is so giving with information. She's a very successful painter, and she does some of the events that I also do, like the Winter Park Paint Out.
and
Uh,
what is the Winter Park Paint Out?
so paint outs are events that have artists come together to paint outside and they produce as many paintings as possible for, let's say, a limited duration, maybe a week, and then frame them and hang them at a gallery where the public comes to see them and buy. And then there are built-in events to the paint out throughout the week, and then there's usually a gala at the end. So there are open paint outs when the public can sign and apply, and then just come paint. And then there are also invitational paint outs or juried paint outs. The Winter Park paint out is a juried paint out. It has 25 artists from around the country.
Oh, wow.
And some of them are local, some of them are from different states. The ones that come from elsewhere are hosted.
Okay.
And they feed us, they treat us so nicely. They basically treat us like royalty so we can just paint. And then
the life.
the life, exactly. And then the events are very well attended, very well marketed, promoted. The place that this paint out is located in, the Alban Palacic Museum, is gorgeous. It's in Winter Park, and it's on a lake. Has beautiful gardens, so much subject matter. Unfortunately, because of what's going on right now, all these paint outs and all these events have come to a stop. Some of them are canceled, some of them are being postponed. Many shows, however, I find are getting, these organizers are becoming very inventive and taking them online.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, the Southeastern Pastel Society International Show, which is a physical show in Atlanta, has gone digital. And Southeastern Pastel Society is an organization that does online shows. So they have the platform, and they know how the know-how of how to do it, and it's easy for them to do. It depends on the organization if they can switch it up quickly and become an online event, and then keep supporting the artists and let them work. So, and as far as I'm concerned, how it's affected me, instead of going to paint in a big group, we might meet somewhere close by and drive in our separate cars and still practice social distancing, not go somewhere crowded, but go somewhere in nature where there aren't any people, and practice social distancing while painting. And then people that come and see what we do, usually they come up and look at what we're painting and converse with us. Now people are respecting space, and maybe they'll walk by, maybe they'll look from afar. So the painting doesn't need to stop, but we just need to adjust temporarily.
When you see them walking from, looking from afar, that's a great opportunity to say, it's better if you just take it home with you. Leave the money in the jar.
That is a great way of, that's a way to support an artist in these times.
I used to live in this town called Ephrata, and it was by this beautiful little art town called Lancaster, and lots of Amish people live there, Amish Mennonite. And so one day I went out for a walk, and I'm walking, I'm like, what is this thing? And in the middle of the sidewalk was this box of just fruits and vegetables and, food just there. And then next to it was like a little jar, and it had a price on it, like, 5, I don't know, apples for $1 or whatever it was. And it was like this honor system. Like, you take the 5 apples, you put $1 in the jar, and you go on your merry way. Like, there was nobody there to man it. It was just there.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Where my sister lives, they do that regularly. She lives in Ojai, California. It's such a beautiful.
Oh, really? Oh, very cool.
Yes, it's an agricultural valley. They have a lot of citrus and avocados. I mean, it's California, so They have the honor system. It's a small town. Same thing.
Yeah, it's just this beautiful experience. So it's kind of funny, I don't, I'm not sure you can do that with artwork, but yeah, just leave a check for $2,000 and and take the painting. How big is your work?
I paint because I paint outside. My work is pretty small right now. 9 by 12 is kind of a standard size. 8 by 10, 16 by 12. Um, so I would like next. I actually would like to go bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but for right now, I'm good. Also, the paper I like to paint on, being a direct painter, a lot of painters do all these underpainting and then
Mm-hmm.
painting on top of the underpaintings. Um, I paint on this reddish paper, and the brand is called Wallace. And recently, the manufacturer, who's this woman, Kitty Wallace, has lost her factory. And so the larger sizes are no longer being sold. And
Mm.
that's affecting my production also. I can get different kinds of paper, which I also like, larger. Um, but this is still my favorite painter. I'm mourning the loss of the larger sizes of this
Mm.
paper. I used to paint larger, believe it or not, when I did the figure. I painted these larger figures.
Mm.
But being outside of the landscape, I find that um, I can work in um, shorter time spans because I'm affected by the heat, by the bugs, by the elements. After a while, I just can't think anymore, and I have to take a break. And having a smaller painting is easier to paint faster, especially at plein air events. More manageable.
When it comes to your work, I do think you have a beautiful, beautiful color palette and sense of color. Um, so can we talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. I think that comes automatically to me. I
Mm.
like limiting my color palette and going in a certain direction. I almost don't think about it at first and kind of see what the painting wants to do, where it's going,
Oh,
and
that's
then I'm
nice.
inspired. And then I maybe think about it a little later, or kind of taking the direction once it takes form.
And are you spending more time interpreting the light through color, or are you really trying to capture what it is that the quote that you're seeing in front of you?
I think it's more of an interpretation, especially with pastel, where you can't mix the colors exactly.
Mm.
You can't, in oil, you can mix that local color precisely if you learn how. In pastel, it's more about letting the value do the work and then thinking in terms of cool and warm, and then maybe layering different colors on top of each other to create a certain color effect, um, and interpreting. And that's kind of what I'm working towards. I'm working towards interpreting the main subject more precisely or closer to what I'm seeing, and then letting the background or the less important elements that aren't in focus be more general and more abstract. I'm kind of thinking about moving in that direction, um, trying to focus on having less detail in the surrounding subject.
Hmm.
That's what I'm thinking about lately. Um, and yeah, and pastel lends itself to that, to the interpretation rather than an exact representation. And I also find that the more I simplify, the more realistic things look too.
It's strange how that works, right?
And when I look at paintings I like and I'm drawn to that read so realistic, that's what I find. And it's just really a simplification of shapes. And it's all about finding the right values that read correctly and then rounding shapes with light and shadow sides and the reflected light, doing that correctly and treating things as just shapes instead of getting into the detail of the object itself.
Yeah, I find with that it's so much easier to capture mood and emotion when you're focusing on the shapes versus all the little details and textures and uh, within the subject.
Mm-hmm.
I saw one painting that you did. I think it's sold, which breaks my heart. A woman's I think it's called morning coffee or something. She's at this table. She's all by herself.
Oh, yes. Okay. If it's the blue, kind of bluish painting, right?
I'm trying to find it again. I can't seem to
Let me
find
look
it.
at your website.
For some reason, I think it might have been blue, but it might have been red.
Oh, I have a series. So I have my outdoor paintings, and then I have a series of interior paintings that
Yeah,
I love to do. And
she's in a
then
restaurant waiting for somebody, and the
right,
person didn't show up.
and a lot of times, and it could be that it's me in the paintings. A lot of times, I'll paint something and then put myself in the interior. Uh, like I'll add myself in from a photograph. It's kind
Hmm.
of thing that I ended up doing it. I fell into it by accident. I needed a figure there. I had someone take my picture. I painted the scene from on site and then sat in the chair, had someone take
Yeah,
a picture of me, and I added myself in just because I needed a figure in the painting, and then I kept doing it. So it's possible that that figure is me. But in the interior paintings, I try and capture mood and atmosphere. And I like scenes where there's a big window where I kind of blow out the air and the light outside and exaggerate it. Um, and then create atmosphere through pushing the figures in the background by eliminating details. Excuse me.
yep.
And putting more details in a focal point. I try and push the atmosphere in those paintings.
Yeah. It's called Morning Light. That's what it is. So
Okay.
there is a woman in there. I'm assuming that's you in the gown.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just dark hair. Is it dark hair? Yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah.
think
That's you?
it is me.
Oh, wow. Um, yeah, I like how she's sitting in that cool blue. There's almost like this little bit of a turquoise coming through it. And uh and then I like how her skin just juxtaposes all that coolness and that lightness with that little bit of almost terracotta, in her. And then as you move across, I like the transition where it begins to turn from this light to this dark, from this cool to this warm.
Mm-hmm.
um, this presence of a human figure to the presence of the chairs pulled out. There's nobody there. When I saw it, I was like, oh my god, this breaks my heart. um, but but I like it. I like this transition that's going on in all these different elements. I also like how you have the table. Above the table she is, but then as you travel across and you ended up not just at the empty side of the table, but also in the empty seat. And so you drop down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so that experience, so you go from top to bottom, left to right, cool to warm, light to dark, like all of these things, and they're all repeating the same story over and over and over again. And it brings me to that point. It's just like, wow, it's just a cool experience to go through this image.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sad that it's sold because I want it. Um,
That was sold to the owner of the coffee shop, actually. This is my favorite coffee shop that I go to in the morning, Barney's Coffee on Park Avenue,
nice coffee.
Park, where most of these interior paintings are from. And I just love the feel. I'm inspired in that coffee shop for some reason. There's also another painting of a cook
Yes,
zesting lemons.
that's the one that when I first felt the breath and the like, right? I was like, ooh, and then I clicked on the next picture and it was that one, and I was like, boom, there it is again. Like the lemons was that inhale of breath, right? And that light hitting the top of the lemons, and then it just fades out into this calmness in the atmosphere and through the cook. And yeah, that was a really beautiful experience too. That's yeah, I
So
like that one
these
a lot.
oftentimes are paintings I paint from in the studio just because it would not be practical to stand there in the way and paint from life. And I'm usually getting my coffee and I'm rushing off to work. And occasionally I'm inspired by a moment I see, and I always bring my phone with me just in case I see something inspiring, like a moment that I see or composition, and I know that I will have to capture that. And oftentimes it has to do with the light outside being it's a cloudy day outside. And so the colors on the inside of that interior are intensified. There's something about the light quality inside that interior on cloudy days that does something. And that reflection on the floor, the way the colors are more intense, that is just so inspiring to me.
Hmm.
I just can't wait to see the next scene that I might
Comes to you.
catch.
Yeah, that's cool. That's very, very cool. Yeah, I found the picture of you. So now I have context of you in that space.
Mhm.
Um, great shoes though. Uh, yeah, this very, very cool. Very cool.
So how the
Um,
interior paintings came about is, as you know, in the summer, Florida can be very hot, and our plein air group started painting inside a large antique shop where they gave us permission to paint.
oh
We got
wow.
the permission and organized this. And for a while, we were painting in this wonderful antique shop called Adjectives, also in Winter Park. I know I'm giving all these plugins, but they liked us painting there because it brought people in. It was interesting. We tried to stay out of the way. We were respectful.
Hmm.
And after a while, we stopped painting there because some of the other painters got upset because the objects they were painting would be selling as they were painting them and walking away. Their subjects were disappearing and they couldn't keep painting them, and they were getting frustrated. So that's why we stopped painting there. But I mean, that's where the interior painting series came from. And then it carried on to the coffee shop.
Mm.
Uh,
I love that idea. Like if I owned an antique shop, I would be like sticking cameras everywhere and just live streaming them for our artists to come and paint. Give them like something neat to look at. But it's also a way to get your name, your name of the business out.
right. And this antique shop is where they really know how to style things
Mhm.
rather than just, some antique shops, they just pile everything together, and you just have to kind of sift through. But here they style it very artistically. And so it gives you, there are so many vignettes that you would like to paint there.
Yeah, that's cool. Wow. Um, as an interior designer, when you're working on your pastels, what's a discipline that you've pulled from your interior design into your art, into your fine art?
I would say I do perspective pretty naturally just because of my training. So I'm not afraid of architectural paintings, and that's why I like doing all these houses and structures. I'm drawn to them. The 1 point perspective, 2 point perspective, 3 point perspective. I understand that innately, and I do house portrait commissions often too.
Mm,
Uh, and I again I like that juxtaposition of the organic shapes, the hard shapes with the natural shapes. Um, I feel like it creates interesting compositions, interesting skyline shapes.
mm,
Uh, and so I like that subject, and I think a lot of people may be afraid of perspective,
mm.
uh, where it is easier for me.
Gotcha.
Um, yeah, and I've discovered boats recently at a paint out in New Smyrna. And I guess there are a lot of boats in Florida, and so that's my new favorite subject. And I consider boat a form of architecture.
Of course.
So,
Yeah, I
uh,
used to have a good friend. He was in the yacht design, and actually a couple of them, and they are uh, beautiful things to be in and on and round and see built, and fascinating creatures, yachts and boats. Um, the one that you had here, there's one that I saw was like parked by a tree, I think. Um, there was these big shapes, that formed the hull of the boat and then the interior of the boat. And I really liked the sensitivity that you took to really, in the end, you're looking at a boat, but I get the impression like you weren't really trying to draw a boat per se, but just caring for all these shapes that kind of work together and piece themselves, and then in the end, you have this boat. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah,
um, and so, like, how long ago did you start working with the boats?
I guess it was maybe a couple of years ago.
Hmm.
Because the New Smyrna paint out, New Smyrna Beach, it's a beach, it's a barrier island. There's a mainland part of it and an island part of it. There are lots of boats. There are marinas, small and large. There are also all these boat yards, which are some of my favorite spots. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
one of the paintings that I just sold yesterday is a fish out of water, which I painted in a boatyard, and I just want to go back to that boatyard and paint some more. Uh, Maybe now is a good time. I mean, it's getting a little hot, but if you go early in the morning and find a shady spot, there's
Heck yeah.
probably nobody else there right now.
Probably not. That's actually probably a great time to go. Yeah, it's hmm.
Um, and and painting in a boatyard too. There are also other boats that you can situate yourself under, so you have a shady spot.
Yeah.
We're usually in a marina. Sometimes, depending on the place, it's not easy to find shade. That's also always a consideration in plein air painting. Where's my shady spot to stand in?
So don't burn up. One of my favorite paintings of yours is the peacock on the I don't even know what it's standing on. It's like a little, I want to say like a little pedestal of some sort. Uh,
Yes,
when I saw that, I was like, oh my god, this is awesome, awesome.
so
Mm.
that's an interpretation of a sculpture. Actually, the sculpture itself is bronze,
Oh
but I
really?
push the color on it, and it does have this sculpture has special effects of these colors that are in the bronze that only shimmer when the light hits it. And it's not quite depicted the way I did it, and I made it into a more realistic live peacock. But this was I painted a few of these in preparation for a quick draw, like a practice. And so I had a few versions of it. And it just turned out to be more of a realistic peacock, and that's how I interpreted it. Pushed the color of a bronze painting, and then simplified with how the palm was in the background. And then I did do an underpainting on this one with all these pinks underneath that created this vibrancy between the cool and the warm, which is kind of what I'm interested in. And then creating, all these three-dimensional shapes was so much fun. I really enjoyed doing this. It was fun. But then during the quick draw itself, I remember that was one of the moments where you ask yourself, why am I doing this? Because it was so hot. The wind was blowing so hard that morning. I was holding onto my easel for dear life from it blowing away. And then I painted it twice as large as I planned on, just because it just came to me, I'm going to paint this larger. And I'm glad I practiced it. I mean, because then I kind of knew what I was doing, the decisions have been made. And that's not always a privilege someone has. If you're local, you can go and kind of think about what you're going to do. If you're coming there driving from somewhere else for the day, you don't have that privilege. And then and I ended up winning the event. I mean, I don't know if I deserved it or not, but it was, at the end, it was all worth it. But at the time, I was just miserable painting that thing because of just the elements, the conditions painting outside, which sometimes are fun and sometimes are hard. And that's part of the fun of plein air painting, the challenges from the elements.
Yeah. You have a painting called Gate of Forgotten Dreams. Is that a cemetery?
Okay, that's actually a gateway. No, it's in a beautiful college campus called Rollins College, also in Winter Park. That was an interpretation of, so I painted the gate the way I saw it, and then the light behind I really pushed. So that was kind of an interpretation of a dreamy light, pushing the light and the colors also. And that gate is the way it is. And I painted it from both sides. I have two of the same gate from both sides. There's really beautiful architecture on that campus. It's more than 100 years old.
Oh, wow. With your works, do you ever, do you just kind of get set up and get into the creating of the artwork, or do you do preparatory work and sketches and design and things like that before moving into your final piece?
I am really trying to be good at doing a prep thumbnail. I'm always doing it. Sometimes I rush myself, but I'm trying to be good at it because it always pays off in the end. As far as placement of things, and I find the design of the painting is so important. And I feel like my 2D design, my instinct I rely on my instinct for composition. But then I don't always get it right. Sometimes I put it down and then I regret it. And I've already invested and I've put all this time and work into it. And I find that making myself do those thumbnail sketches a lot of times more than one is so helpful. And other times if I don't do it and rush through it. I kind of struggle my way through it and then find a way to fix it, but um, and think about it later, find fixes, but it's more of a struggle. Let's say it's more.
Yeah, because then rather than being in control and deliberate and allowing this expression to occur, then you're kind of just fixing. You kind of putting out fires and just trying to fix stuff, and then when you fix that, then this other thing happens, and this and sometimes then you just have to kind of walk away.
Right, right. You
Yeah.
find yourself in problem solving mode. You're
Yep.
more frustrated. Exactly. You got
I'm a big believer in architecting your work. That's why I created my academy, and the Academy of Composition is like I wanted people to
it. Oh,
just
sorry about
yeah
Amber
just
Alert on my phone. Sorry
what
about
was
that.
that?
I think it was an Amber Alert on my phone.
Goodness. Um, and then in doing that, just spending time with people to encourage them on uh taking the time to really think through the composition, really think through the design, which then ultimately makes the execution so much more fun and quicker because you've already thought through a lot of the problems that you would be trying to figure out on the spot. Um, and then it also gives you this much more of an intimate experience because you know it deeper, you know, when you go to actually do the work. Huh, that was a weird sound. Um, well, let me ask you a question here. If you're still there, right?
Yes.
Okay. um, if somebody, an artist came to your studio and they wanted some advice on pastels, let's say, what's something that you would share with them?
I would share with them the difference between hard and soft pastels
Mm-hmm.
and how the softness or the hardness of the pastel relate to the process of painting and how I approach what I start with, usually harder pastel, and then ending up on top with usually softer pastels. Not everybody does it this way, but that's how I do it.
Would
And
that be the same as kind of like using a hard pencil versus a soft lead pencil?
correct.
Wow. Okay.
Um,
I learned something new today. That's cool.
and it's also a way of doing, there are layers just like in oil going
Mm-hmm.
from dark to light. It's the same in pastel. You go from dark to light.
Okay.
And I usually map out the shapes in a darker pastel underneath and then lighten up as I go along. Um, and I start with the harder pastel. And sometimes I do use a brush with alcohol or water to
Mm.
wash and do create a little bit of an underpainting to ground the colors that are on top,
Mm-hmm.
create mass shapes.
So
Uh,
then what you're doing is you're using that liquid version of the pastel, kind of almost like a paint that you're putting on your surface, and then you're coming back and allowing the texture of the paper and the pastel to kind of give you that second layer on top.
yes, exactly.
Wow,
And
that's nice.
the paper itself is sanded paper. That,
Okay.
and that's how you're allowed to layer a lot because the tooth of the paper holds layers. And that's where the art of pastel has come in such a long way in the past 20 years or so,
Mm-hmm.
because this paper didn't exist beforehand, and the variety of pastel brands and hardnesses and soft and how soft they are, that is a new thing.
Hmm.
Uh, it's really I would say a renaissance of this medium that is promoted by the many pastel societies around the country and the
Mm-hmm.
world. headed by the oldest pastel society in America, which is Pastel Society of America. I don't remember exactly how old it is, but I believe that is the oldest one. And then there are other very old pastel societies and very established, like the one in Atlanta, Southeastern Pastel Society. And then, I mean, Florida itself has at least five societies, believe it or not, to
Wow.
give access, because it's a large state, to give access to everyone so they don't have to drive far for a workshop.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so all these societies are promoting the medium and education about the medium, bringing workshops in. So that's the fun part of this, of being a pastelist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's just the times we're living in for this medium.
That's awesome. Did you ever use what is it called? Pan pastel? With a
I
little
have them. I bought them at the convention when I was there, and
mm-hmm.
I have to say that I haven't taken them out of the box. I mean, now I remember they're somewhere and I need to find them.
Yeah, the
And
town I used to live right next door, the people who invented those lived there. And so it was I was dear friends with a lady named Sid McGinley, who's a world class pastel artist. And I remember doing a video at her studio, and she had these pan pastels laid out, and it was gorgeous to look at, and just the way that they work and everything. It was very cool.
that's amazing. I think these people use the pastels with brushes more like you would use oil paints, and
Yeah.
paintings look more blended than, and less with strokes and more, yeah, more blended, I would say.
Yeah, because you're not picking them up like you're using a mark making tool, like a direct mark making tool like that. You're kind of it does look like you're kind of it almost looks like a either a gouache or a watercolor cake palette, like a palette of a watercolor where you take your brush and you mix it and then you use it that way. And they do have like these little sponge brushes, I guess, to apply the pastel.
Yeah.
Um, but I'll tell you, it's uh, I haven't used them. I seen them used, but I think what attracts me to the pastel is the texture. That 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 it gives a nice slight hum to the work, and it's really the I guess the tooth of the paper that's giving that texture, right?
It is. It is. And it's applying using the side of the pastel and then controlling, I've heard it said, the light touch is the right touch. So
Mm,
not overdoing it, creating layers of light touches over and over again, maybe with different colors on top of each other, um, to create that vibrancy, or that, um, yeah, the vibrancy between the different colors. And then if you have a darker paper underneath, you let the paper show a little bit, um, of the color of the paper. I like doing that.
wow. I think I'm going to try it. I think I'm going to try it because the I've always been impressed by people who have a light touch to their work. Primarily because my touch is very heavy when I'm doing mark making. And it always has been ever since I was a little kid. Like it just like I could tell my line, you know. Um, and and so I think I'd like to explore that just because if you have to, it may force me to kind of have a lighter touch with things like that. So that's cool. So outside of being a pastelist, just being an artist in general, I want to ask you two more questions about this. One about art making, and then two, what kind of advice would you give somebody for marketing? Okay, so what kind of advice would you give with the idea of being an artist?
The idea of being an artist, to me,
Mm-hmm.
is that, I never want to stop growing and learning. I feel like I'm always inspired. I have goals, and I feel like, oh, when I achieve them, I have a next goal.
Mm,
And there are so many aspects to being an artist. There's the creation part, there's the learning part, there's the personal growth part, the interpersonal part between when you're dealing with other artists or galleries. And then there's the business part of it.
mm,
And it all depends on you and where you want to take it. Do you want to be just paint for yourself and be a hobbyist? Do you want your art to be seen by other people? Do you want to make it into a business? That's just a personal choice. And there's so much to learn um, in all those aspects.
mm-hmm,
And I like the way that you can divide your time between the different aspects and it's not just the same thing, because if you're just there staring at a canvas day in and day out, I feel like I need a break too from that, and I need to change it up and sit at the computer and work on my MailChimp or website or do something else.
you're MailChimp. You do know marketing. Look at you.
A little bit. I'm trying to learn. Honestly, I'm listening to podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
What podcast are you listening to besides the world's greatest art podcast, Drawn to Win with Don Victor? But outside of that one, which podcast are you listening to?
so outside of that world famous great art podcast, Victor's podcast is really recommend the Thriving Artist podcast.
Oh yeah.
It's about the business of art, and it is by,
Corey Huff, right?
I don't remember the man's name. It is by a nonprofit organization called the Clark Hewling Fund,
Ah, okay.
and they also have free online classes.
Mm.
And then there's convention or course that you can travel to, and that's a little bit more involved and a little bit more of a commitment, which I haven't done because it's a time commitment. Uh, but that is, it's interviews with artists that have different knowledge, and then you can learn from them. And as I said, there's also an online course that is free that you can take. I learned a lot from that. Um, there's also the Marketing Minute
Mm.
by Eric Rhodes, and I love the Plein Air podcast by Eric Rhodes. He wrote a book that I intend to buy and listen to. There's also, I believe, a book called The Red Dot by the owner of Xanadu Gallery in Scottsdale. I don't remember his name right now. I read that book about pursuing galleries, and that was very good. Um, that's what I remember right now.
Oh, that's
So,
a lot of great information. Uh, I was just looking up the Thriving Artist podcast there. Right. Oh, here it is. Clark Healing Fund. That's cool. Very, very
it's
cool.
basically a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to the business success of artists.
Yeah.
Believe
Okay,
that.
that's what it
How
is.
great is
Yes.
that? That there is such a thing.
Yeah. Actually, it's a second thing today I found like that. I just got off the phone before talking with you, with an atelier that they're tuition free, right? A tuition free art school, and they have studios all around the world. And I'm like, well, how do you make your money then, right? And I guess there was a very wealthy guy, did very, very well in his life, and he put his fortune into that, and so you have to apply. That's a very certain level of merit that they're looking for in a person, right? A certain character that they're looking for. But then if they accept you, you go through. their training course at no cost to you. And,
That's amazing.
yeah, and then even in Lancaster, it was telling this guy that there was a very wealthy man, and he bought all of these buildings on this one street called Prince Street, and then they renamed it to Gallery Row because he basically converted all these buildings into art galleries. I think they're like 36 art galleries or something that he owns. And he would interview every single person. And I think he started this like 20 years ago. And he interviewed the artists who wanted to take occupancy. But they had to have a certain character where, they had to be an artist dedicated to their craft, to their art. But they also had to have a shrewdness about them in terms of an acumen, in terms of business. So he had to feel like, you know what, these people are going to be here 15 years from now, right? That they're not just going to be packed up and out of business in 9 months. And some one of my friends owns one of the galleries, and she's been there for 14 years. But the gallery that she was in was vacant for 2 years because he couldn't find somebody that he felt had that spirit, that mindset that what he was looking for. And it's one of the lifebloods of the city. It's very, very cool. But there are people out there, who have resources and they love the arts and they want to make a long lasting impression. And so the thriving artist is fun, It's like, this is good stuff. Um so Miss Orit, I have one last question for you. The most important question of all. What do you like to eat?
Oh boy, don't get me started.
Oh, I just did.
So actually, growing up in Israel, I was a little bit spoiled because um, the produce there, fruits and vegetables, everything is grown locally and is so fresh.
Mm,
And then also at the time when I was growing up, not to age myself too much, but my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She really knew how to cook. I had a hot lunch every day. Um, and then my grandmother was also a great cook and a baker, a pastry chef, is, maybe
wow.
with a title, but she cooked for a hotel.
Hmm.
So I was a little bit spoiled um,
Wow.
with just the food that I was eating or that was normal to the culture I came from. And also, Israel is a culture of immigrants with all this variety of food from
Mm-hmm.
Eastern European and Mediterranean, and a lot of flavor. People know how to use spices. Everything is fresh. I mean, in a restaurant, if you refrigerated a tomato, people would usually return the dish. Just the level of expectation is
Wow.
a little different. And then coming here in the 80s was a food culture shock, I had to say. So to this day, I'm a little bit of a difficult and picky eater. Grocery shopping, I mean, I'm fast and efficient at it, but I know what I like, and I I'm like I said, I'm selective, and I like to make my own food. Even going to events, I eat a certain way. Along with also lately developed a few allergies to food. So let's say if
Mm.
I go to a paint out, I will remake all my food in advance and pack it in glass containers and bring it in a cooler, so I don't have to worry about any of any of that but painting. And yeah, it's always a pursuit, or there's always a evaluate. I mean, I'm not a person that will just eat what's put in front of me. Let's just put it that way. So maybe I can be a little bit difficult to other people, or I have to navigate that a little. But but I'm a little bit of a foodie, I have to say. Um, and then, yeah, eating food with a lot of flavor, uh, very fresh. Maybe some people might label it as healthy, healthy, fresh ingredients, spices. I mean, I like food from different ethnicities, I guess.
What's one of the ethnicities that you like?
I like Indian food.
Mm-hmm.
My dad is actually an immigrant from India.
Really?
Well, yeah. So there's
Wait. Your dad. Oh, wait, hold on. Was it your grandfather who went from Argentina to Israel?
so my family on my mom's side, they're Ashkenazi Jews from there. They're from Eastern Europe,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
my grandfather left Europe when he was in his teens and lived in Argentina for a while. That's where he studied art, and then came to Israel. Uh, and then, but my dad's side of the family, they're all from India. Uh,
Wow.
and then it was called Bombay, and there is a minority of Jews in India, and that's where he came from. And
So
who
do
knows?
you have Indian blood, or is it just that your dad was from India but not Indian?
I think the Jewishness goes so far back through the years that there is Indian blood for sure.
Gotcha.
Yes, I
Because
mean,
when I looked at you, I was like, oh, there. Yeah, I mean, there's with the Ashkenazi Jews, I find it very interesting because there's a certain look to them, especially in the women. Um, and and I'm like, oh, okay, I can see that in you, but there was something else in you. I'm like, yeah, there's something, and now it's making sense. Okay, um,
and Indian people do pick me out.
I gotta go back to your picture now. Where are you there? There you are. Yeah, that's cool. That's very cool. All right. Um, that's very cool. That's so cool. I India is a very strange place. Like I would love to go to visit it. I've had Indian people in my life argue with me. They're like, "I know you're Indian, right?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm not Indian. I maybe I am. I don't know. And they're like, "No, there's this one town where everybody looks just like you." And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Now, that was like 20 some years ago. And now when I'm searching on Google and stuff, I'm like, oh my God, like there's a whole, I see them everywhere, right? And, and then when I lived in Portugal, I, like, if it wasn't for the Indians, I built this beautiful relationship with the Indian people there. And I guess Portugal, in Goa, I think.
Goa, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a Portuguese, like, province or whatever they call it. Um, and so it's very possible that I have some Indian root, through Spain, through Portugal, down, going into there. So it's something I want to explore. But right now, what I'm exploring is the food. Uh, and I'm so bummed because there's this beautiful little Indian restaurant that I frequent maybe 2-3 times a week, and and over the last 2 weeks I can't go because of this thing, and then they shut it down because of the coronavirus, and I'm just frustrated. Like today, I just wanted some lentil soup and to taste those spices and um, get some naan, and I can't. I'm ready to cry. So I'm going to call the owner today and offer her a business idea, which is send your employees in, make them, get your, tell the people that go to your restaurant, okay, on this day we're making this, on this day we're making that. Let them prepay it, and then you just drop it off at our doors, right?
That is a great idea. Doorstep delivery. That is a
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah.
I'm really craving. I've been craving the local Indian restaurant here that I like on in Winter Park. And
What's something that you like about them? Like, what's a dish that you like?
they have a great vegetarian selection. There's so many dishes. One is the dal, the lentil soup.
Hmm.
There are all these cauliflower and potato dishes. There are these little eggplants in red sauce. And the spices are also, the combination of spices are so kind of mysterious in Indian food.
They are, right?
Make out what's in there. You don't know how they do it. And I was closer to my mom's side of the family, so I didn't quite get that tutelage from my Indian grandmother of how to make things.
Mm.
I do know how to make dal, and I kind of make it my own with my own spices, but it's not the same as how my grandmother would have made it, and I missed out on that part a little bit.
Spell that word doll. Or
How is it spelled? I'm not sure. Is
is
it
it a D or a B?
It's a D. I think Daal. I'm not
Oh,
sure.
okay.
I'm the worst speller.
Because there's this thing I didn't know what, I don't know, I'm pronouncing like ballet or something, ballet, believe. And I don't know what it was, but it was like spinach, um, mushrooms. They always say Indian spices, or spices, and curry, and there was some other vegetable put in there or whatever. And I was like, okay, because I only allow myself to eat meat on Fridays and Sundays, and so throughout the week, if I'm going to eat something like that, I'll permit myself to have fish. But primarily, I'm a vegetarian, except those 2 days. And uh, the problem is sometimes I get so busy I forget until like Friday night, like last night. I'm like, oh wait, I can eat meat today. I better do it.
So what made you choose that way of eating?
Um, for many, many years, I just kind of felt this whisper inside myself that one day I would probably become a vegetarian. I love meat. I mean, I love going to like all you can eat meat places. I love it. But when I listen to my spirit inside, I'm just like, when I visualize the authentic version of me, um, I don't see the real me having that type of relationship with when it comes to food, that kind of relationship with meat. But I love it, and I've grown up with it. Um, but lately, I just decided, just for an act of discipline, uh, to reserve Friday and Sunday, primarily Sunday because I meet with my little church group and we eat after church together. And so, therefore, I don't want to come with any weird, oh, I can't eat that, whatever. And so, Sunday, I just allow myself whatever and just enjoy it. And then for Friday, uh, I just chose that I wanted to do the fish, the vegetarian, and not that I'm actually labeling it, just basically eat vegetables and, non meat things. And then on Friday, I kind of just set it up as a reward for myself. And then just in case I needed certain proteins or whatever, I gave myself that opportunity. But but the truth is I don't even have a craving for it anymore. So right now, like when I eat meat, I'm usually kind of forcing myself to have it. Um, and so I'm like, maybe in a couple years or a couple months, who knows? I just might be like, let's just, you know. So it wasn't necessarily a health reason. It was just I just want to become truer to who I feel that I am, and this was just a step in that direction, and just to break away. So so that's how I bake things now. you know, I'm doing a lot more cooking in that sense, and exploring more vegetarian foods. But uh, uh that's the answer, and I'm sticking to it. So
Well, that's gracious of you not to, yeah, to decide not to be a difficult guest. Um, I struggle with that sometimes, I guess, being a picky eater and having allergies.
mm,
Um, but I guess there are ways to just be gracious about it that I find that to kind of, yeah, not do it um, very blatantly, I guess. But yeah, I guess that's a gracious way of being.
Well, one way you could do it, to throw that balance, right? Like for example, I don't drink sodas, and and so when I go to this group, a lot of times the people who's in charge of bringing the drinks, I just bring all these sodas, right? And I'm just like, oh, yeah, I guess I'm drinking water today, right? um, and so the way I kind of throw that balance out is I take time to craft the thing that I bring. So sometimes I might start on a Saturday morning to cook for what we're going to eat on Sunday because I want to make sure that it marinates well. I want to make sure, and I kind of just, it's an act of love for these people.
Mhm.
Because when I was growing up, my father, uh, I grew up in foster care, so I had a lot of different dads, but the one that I call my dad, one thing that he would do is on Sundays, he would create this big meal. And he still does it. And as I got older, I was like, my God, like this man probably spends $120, just on this one meal every week, and you try to quantify, and I'm like, why would he do such a thing, And you got seven brothers, then you got wives, and then you got, family members, and children, but he still does it every Sunday. You can go to the house and eat. Um, And he does it because he loves us, right? And he does it because it's a way of gathering the family together. And so I was like, you know what? I'm very far from them right now. And so a way for me to kind of feel the presence of my father, was I adopted that gift that he would give us every Sunday, and I'm giving it to these people, right? And so I'll go out and invest in, great piece of meat or a great pastry, like not buy it, but like the materials actually take the time to craft out a pastry, and it just as an act of love for these people, right?
Mhm.
And so as my father loved us through food, I get to love them, and it and it's cool. So um so if you ever feel a little weird, just make sure that you bring something that people will absolutely love. It kind of like hides the fact that you're not eating their stuff. Uh,
Yeah, that is a great idea.
and yeah. So the thing they loved the most so far was this pastry that I made, and I'm actually probably gonna make it tomorrow for myself. Um, but I use this pastry puff pastry,
Hmm.
and then I like to put maybe like a little butter on it, or a little vanilla and cinnamon in it, give it a little zazz. And then I make uh, cream cheese. I get the cream cheese, and then I put inside there some confectionery sugar, right? Some powdered sugar in there, and put that in there. And then I peel a lemon and just let it sit, and I let that sit overnight so that that lemon flavor just it comes into that cream cheese. And
Hmm.
oh my goodness, it becomes so light.
Hmm.
And then you put that inside the pastry, and you roll it up, and you bake it. But oh, and yeah, uh, they love that because it's such a yummy pastry, and then with that nice soft lemony flavor in the inside of that cream cheese, it's just like yeah. Now I'm hungry. Thanks.
You're making me think about what I want to eat tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm gonna start doing some
Think
pastel
about
paintings of
cheating.
food now. What was that?
You're making me think about cheating.
Cheating? What? What do you mean cheating?
Going to the French pastry shop and
That's not cheating.
good.
That's just loving yourself. It's crazy because I think since this quarantine, I think I'm calling it the quarantine 15. I think a lot of people are gaining weight like insane because you're just like
You're next to the kitchen all
exactly.
times.
Uh, It's so frustrating. And then, and like, even though you might have a positive outlook or whatever, the truth is the uncertainty of it all is stressful. And
Mhm.
so, I'm realizing, so for example, like if I bite my nail, right, I'm like, whoa, like this is something I do. I try to pay attention to my body language. So if I bite, I'm like, okay. So what I'll do is then I'll go and I'll clip all my nails, right? And then go through the process of sanding them and forcing myself to take that moment of stress and create something, right? And care and create my nails, right? So that way I'm not biting them. And that kind of allows me to take the energy that was coming out as stress and kind of like let it um squeak out, through this creative mode. Um and cooking does that for me too, because if I try not to buy like already made stuff, like cookies and like junk like that. And so the deal I have with myself is I can eat whatever I want, but I have to make it,
Mhm.
right? And that way it's not just, oh, I'm gonna go eat a pack of cookies. If I want cookies, I have to go make them, right, and bake them and take the time. So like this morning, like today, I'm eating my bread, which I put the dough together last night, and I knew today was gonna be very, very, very busy. I wasn't gonna have time to cook throughout the day. And so, this morning I put it in the oven and baked my bread, and now, I can just run to the kitchen and get a nice little piece of bread, um, and I'll eat later tonight when my day's over. But I won't buy a loaf of bread anymore because it's just full of crap and poison and all kinds of horrible things.
That sounds amazing. That homemade bread.
Oh, it's really, really good. It took about 2.5 months to get to the place where it's like, oh, I have the confidence. I know if I do this, 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 and this is going to come out. And uh, it took a while and a lot of practice, but wow. Go learn how to make some bread if you know, well, you might come back 45 pounds heavier though.
Right.
uh, all right. It was beautiful talking to you. Um, I enjoy your work. I enjoy your spirit. Something about your spirit. I'd love to meet you in person one day. Um, and uh, and just kind of see how you work. Um, I'm very much into this idea that if you put yourself into something like a work of art, it is a self portrait. It really is an expression of you, even if you're not consciously thinking about it. Just the decisions that you make that manifest the art are the decisions that you make that manifest your life, and then that's why it's a self portrait. And I like your art. There's a nice elegance to it, but it also feels very like grounded and like real, you know. And I get that sense from you. So
Thank you so much. And I have to say that I so much enjoyed speaking with you. And I love the depth of your thought and your interpretation. You take everything to a deeper level, and you kind of dig something out of it beyond the surface that is really beautiful and spiritual, I have to say. Um, I just love how you look at things. And I think that's what makes you good at what you do. You have this very unique perspective, and you're not just brushing on the surface of a subject. It's very refreshing, I have to say.
yeah,
Um, I really enjoyed it. And yeah, you're welcome to join me in painting anytime. I don't know what, I mean, the proximity of things and location makes things, in our vast country difficult, but I'm sure maybe we'll run into each other
yeah.
at
It,
one point in time.
I've never had this idea before until right now. Um, but I do like your use and your way of pastel, and so maybe we can work together on something. I'd love to maybe get your feedback as I move in that direction, and I don't know how fast I'm going to move into that, right? Because it's not like a burning desire in me, but it is. Uh, I've composed out several images, and I've just been looking for a medium um, to execute it in, and I think the two that I would really like to do is the pastel, but I also find mosaics very fascinating, and like sculpture release. But maybe we can work together and you can give me some feedback on my pastel work or
I would
something.
love to do that. I would absolutely love it. Wouldn't it be interesting if you did the same painting in different mediums?
Actually, that's it's funny you say that. Uh, because I teach composition and I'm all about composition, and so for the last, I've been at it for close to 30 years. But for the last, 25 years, I made the decision when I was, I guess probably about 19, somewhere around there, um, that I wasn't going to pursue the career of an artist. And I made a conscious decision on it that one, I wanted my art to be made for art's sake, not for paying my bills. And when I made that decision, I was able to make another decision, which was I know artists struggle with composition and conceptualization of ideas. And I knew that at an early age. And so I wanted to spend about 20 years just studying and absorbing and pushing and exploring and examining these two concepts. Like, how do you come up with an idea? How do you design it and compose it, right? Because I was trained when I was younger to believe that if you can design, you can do anything. And so even though I went to school as an illustrator, I would win architectural charrettes, right? How did this illustrator win architectural charrettes? Well, because I intimately understood design, even though I wasn't called a designer, and I also understood storytelling, um, and so from that perspective, I'm like, okay, I'll focus on a designer. So right now, I I have a couple compositions, and I'm looking for artists who want to perform those compositions in their instrument, of choice, be it pastel, be it sculpture, be it painting, or their style, right? And it's something I'm trying to implement in the art world. This idea that you can work in collaboration with composers, people who naturally know how to come up with great ideas and design it in a way to communicate these things with people who maybe struggle with that, but they're brilliant and they love the process of their medium,
Mhm.
right? And and um and to come together and just like John Lennon and Paul McCartney, or or Lionel Richie and Kenny Rogers used to, like one creates the composition, the music, the other one brilliantly performs it, and
Mhm.
then the audience is enriched by it, you um, or you might relate to it more like this, like it's I look at it like an architect, and a contractor, right? And it's like, how can we design this thing for the client, but then you hand that over to the contractor to go build it out, you know? And so I love
Yeah,
your idea.
to looking to what your intent is. So if you want to shoot me some images, I'm totally game at looking at them. But it's hard to make a promise because I'll let you know how sometimes people shoot ideas at me and say, "Oh, this would look so good," or they'll point something out, and what they see, I don't see at all. And sometimes I have to see my own inspiration, and what someone else looks at doesn't inspire me. And if it doesn't inspire me, then it's really hard to spend hours and hours with it, painting it.
Oh, you want me to send you one of my compositions?
Or, I mean, if you want to collaborate, I'm open on doing that, is what
Oh,
you,
that's cool. Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, if that's what you meant. I don't know if that's what you meant. Maybe I'm reading something different
Um, we
into
could
it.
talk about that. That would be cool. I love your style and I love your
Okay,
approach.
maybe that's not what you meant. Maybe I read wrongly into what you were saying.
Well, what you interpreted was what I was saying. You got. I wasn't saying it to you specifically,
Okay, okay.
but the fact that you sent that back to me, I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. Sure, I can send you a composition if you want. You take a if you like it, perform it. You know, if you sell it, we'll split it 50-50. Um, but I do work with an artist, a portrait artist. She's a brilliant portrait artist, really, really good at what she does. But she struggles looking past the teeth and the eyeballs and the likeness of the person. She's really good at capturing that. And so I work with her. We'll meet with the clients through the internet. I'll come on, ask some very. I asked the one client a question. She's like, I don't understand how that has anything to do with my children, right? And I'm like, it has everything to do with your children. And then ultimately they realized what I was trying to get at and we got something beautiful out of it. Um, and then and then I help her compose these paintings to, I always call it triggering the emotion that you want in the viewer. And then she executes it in the painting. And we've been doing this for about a year now. And so she pays me 20% of her commissions, because I come in. Yeah, I'm like, man, I love this. I'm getting to create artwork all the time, but I don't have to get into the painting part of it, right? I get to keep myself clean.
Okay, then you found the right person to collaborate with because she's missing an element that you have, and vice versa. You found the right collaborator.
Yeah, yeah. And so the goal, I would love to have about maybe 10 or 15 great relationships with artists who we could collaborate on things like that. That would be, oh God, that would be heaven. So building towards that. But yeah. So Orit, wonderful. Wonderful.
One point I wanted to add, it would be a little bit like jumping back into the conversation that happened a while ago about the interior paintings that I'm thinking about now, the way you interpreted them,
Mm-hmm.
and you gave the painting a narrative, and that's what I like about the interior paintings with the figures in them is that they have a narrative.
Mm.
When I'm painting them, I'm not thinking about the narrative or the message that's in them.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe some other artists insert a message into their paintings, but the message forms itself, maybe subconsciously, maybe I think about it later. Uh, Sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's not, but it just kind of tells itself. That's the only thing sometimes you think about, oh, I wanted to say that, but now I'm thinking about it. So that's the only thing
Yeah.
to add to what we talked about before.
And that's where that's something I stress a lot is when you have this idea. Well, here's a story. You're Jewish, right?
Right.
Okay. So I always love this story in the we call it, from Christian perspective, the Old Testament, right?
Mhm.
But I guess in the Torah, that not the, that's the land, the Torah. There's a story where God says to the Israelites, like, "Hey, go," and they run off in the battle, right? And then they get their butts beat, and then they come back and what the heck was that? Like, you told us to go, and now we got beat, right? And so he says, the priests go before God, and he says, go, and then they run out and they get beat again, and they're getting confused, and then it happens again, and so they go through this process again, and God says, go, and they're like, well, maybe we're just going to hold off for 1 second, and maybe there's more to it, right? And then I guess they get more instructions or whatever it is, and then they go and they win. And so I always love that story because I think as artists, we get this inspiration, then we want to go and make it. And sometimes we have to just be still, right? And listen. Like, oh, okay, well, no, let's explore this. Let's push a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, this beautiful thing comes out of it, right? And it requires an incredible amount of discipline not to run and try to just see what this thing looks like, but to be able to see it first clearly inside. And and that just releases a different level of art because you do it with intention, right?
Mm-hmm.
I read an article this woman wrote about why it's not good for people. She called it shacking up, right? Unmarried people to move in together.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what, and she was a psychologist, and this is her reasoning for why it's not quote unquote good. Because oftentimes when people are young, they fall in love, right? And they move in together. And the reason why is because they're like, hey, we can just share bills, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Well, then they end up engaging in married activities. They're not married. And then someone gets pregnant. And now they're managing that crisis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they stay together. And then something else happens. Oh, I lost my job or this. Then they're managing that thing. And so what their marriage basically is built on is the management of crises, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where if they decided, hey, if we're going to move in, let us get married first, right? That shifts the entire energy of the relationship because now they're building with intentionality and deliberateness and choice, right?
Right.
It's an act of power,
Mm-hmm.
not we'll just see what happens. And too many artists, I think, are just we'll see what happens, and then we try to interpret rationalize some meaning at the end of it. And but if you're still, you hear and you have that relationship with the muse, that thing that's inspiring you, that spirit, that because inspiration means to be in the spirit of. So what is that thing that's calling to you, and to be able to listen to it and then and participate in that creative process together, it changes the what you produce and and then you're not just trying to make something up at the end. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you get what I'm saying.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So,
Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this interview.
me too. In just 30 days, the Core 80 experience teaches you to decode the intentional design underneath great masterpieces. Through video lessons, assignments, and feedback, you learn to recognize the underlying structures like thrust maps, echoes, and gamuts that give master compositions substance and gravitas. Knowing how master artists and illustrators compose their artwork unlocks your ability to give your artwork more meaning and energy. Enroll today and get a 7-day no-hassle money-back guarantee at core80.com.